right. Hello, Specialness. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Kim.
And here we are, just knee-deep in Season 2. Today, we're going to continue our discussion of how we have managed to stay married despite everything going on. Talking about faith and the importance faith has played in our relationship.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
welcome.
So this is the last episode on marriage, focusing on our marriage.
For now, yeah. I'm sure something.
And we kind of saved the best for last because we've been married for 30 years, been together, 37?
31 this July.
31
so almost 31.
Yes. And when we sit back and look over those 30 years, what has been the biggest thing that has grounded us in that is our faith? In fact, it's so important to us. We went and got tattoos.
Yeah.
I have faith and a cross on mine. And
show them.
Can you
show them?
Can you see?
See?
Oh, mine says
here's,
can you
here's
see?
mine.
I don't know. Can you see? Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll have to maybe take a picture of it. But yeah. It's not like we're big tattoo people.
No, I've only got 14 others.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that just kind of symbolizes, it's been very important to us.
And we did that when we were 50.
Turned 50.
When you turned 50.
When I turned 50, yes.
Yeah.
So, we both grew up in the church.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had that in common, which helps a marriage. And I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago, that on our wedding day, and we're standing up there and we're saying our vows, and it's for better, for worse, and richer for poor, all that stuff. We had no idea what was in front of us. Nobody,
but we sure didn't think it was this.
We did not. And not that, nobody knows what is in front of them.
Like everybody else, we were, excited about a future that we assumed would be normal, I guess.
Whatever normal is.
Yeah, whatever normal is.
It wasn't this.
No, it was not this.
No. And so, now that we have hindsight and we can look back, we can see that there's been a divine plan for our lives. And you said it best the other day about...
I probably did.
You did. When you were saying that both of us knowing that God has had a hand and a plan in our life, it's kind of helped center us. It hasn't made the hard go away.
And I think that's that's the most important thing about what I would say about the importance of faith to us, because, we're certainly not saying that faith has solved all of our problems, when we needed them solved, and there was, it's always made it easier, because it hasn't. It's been a struggle and continues to be a struggle, but faith in a plan certainly makes it more palatable.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it just helps to feel like it's not all happening for no reason at all.
Right. And that's been good because we're both on the same page in that regard, that we both see it, that we were chosen to be Kason and Jackson's parents, that we're in this story, whatever you want to call it. Journey.
Yeah.
For a bigger purpose, and we don't know what that purpose is.
Yeah.
And
well, I guess it's big. We know as much as we know. We know that parenting Kason is a challenge in many ways, and it's clear that not many people would be up for it, and we are. So that's the part we know.
Yeah.
What it means with each passing day changes,
right?
Because the demands and needs change, but and the other thing is, I think it's also important to say, like anything else, uh, it wavers, right? I mean, we go through, when we've talked about going through the valleys, right? And how being there for each other to allow the other one to feel that way is important. And that is, for a very dramatic way to put it is that's a crisis of faith. But it's just life is especially hard sometimes, especially heavy sometimes, and you do question it, And
yeah, because there's been multiple times where we've said this is not fair. Why us?
More of that. More. Why is this happening?
Why is this happening?
Why is this so hard? Why can't this just? It's hard enough. Why can't this thing be easier?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's certainly still hard. I would even say sometimes it's hard to have faith, but ultimately, it having it is far easier than not having it.
Right. And I'm going to keep saying that the same statement of we can look back and see specific examples of God showing up in our lives where, we say, you and I, way before all this stuff happened to us, we would joke about, wouldn't it be nice if God would just, like, you would say a prayer, have a prayer, and we were like, wouldn't it be nice if God just put a big old neon flashing sign in your yard?
Just do what he's done before, just burn a bush or something.
Yeah, and come speak to you and be like, do this, don't do this, yes, that's the answer, no. And we kind of used to joke about it, but we have some specific examples of where we're like, wow, like God just answered in a huge way. And the first example of that was when we were, we'd lost the baby. We had done the whole adoption process, and we had thought we were about to adopt a little girl, named Zoe. Ended up being Zoe, but we had a really strong connection with her birth parents, and just felt they loved us, we loved them.
No, she had basically told you that it was a done deal.
Yeah, a done deal. And you kind of get into this place as a wannabe mom, dad, you're excited, and we get a phone call. I think it was like September, October, and they decided to go with another couple. So we were devastated about that. And at the same time, my sister was about to have her baby, which is the first grandchild for my parents. All of our friends, everyone that I had been pregnant with at the same time, they've all had their kids. Some were pregnant again. And I just felt, especially as this wannabe mom, I was just being left behind. And as we've talked about before, I just wanted to be a mom, right? I mean, that's what I wanted.
That's still what you want.
Yeah, still want. Yeah. And it just was one of these things every day. I mean, we pray about it, and why is this happening? I felt like every time I turned around, somebody else was announcing their pregnancy, and somebody else just had a baby, and just couldn't escape it. And one day, my very last friend, who she herself had a little bit of fertility issues, called me and told me that she was pregnant. And it just kind of sent me over the edge. And I kind of had a one-on-one with God and said, look, dude, I need a sign that I'm going to be a mom. Somehow I need a sign. And I left and went to volunteer at our church, actually. And that afternoon I came back and checked our voicemail the old way. You had to call into the,
It wasn't even the answering machine. I believe it was called Call Notes.
Yeah, Call Notes.
Yeah.
And there was a message from our adoption agency from a social worker who said that there was a young couple who was going to be having a baby in about a month or so, and that they wanted to meet with us in the next couple days. And I literally remember like being overwhelmed because that was the first time something like that had ever happened, where literally I was 3 hours prior, like at my lowest point. And then I get a phone call and I call you and I was like, we are meeting with the birth family on whatever date, a couple days. So that was, and obviously that was Kaysen. Again, we had different idea of what Kaysen was going to be. And
because we told the agency that we would take literally anything
but
mental illness.
Mental illness. Yeah. But again, God knew.
Again, it makes faith is not, we're going to get there in a minute, but faith is, it's not as easy as it sounds.
No, not at all. So that was Kaysen's kind of, not Kaysen's, but my eye-opening experience with God. And
call them God winks.
God wink.
Yeah.
And ironically, it happened with Jackson's adoption. We had been matched with a birth family in Houston. We had gone down and met with them, and I talked to her, the birth mother, for 6 weeks straight on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
We had named that baby, little boy, named him Mac. Michael was his first name, and that was a family name that they wanted to use. And so we had a really good relationship with them.
You talked to her like every night.
I talked to her all the time. And surprisingly, about September, we get a phone call from our social worker. And at the time, it was a different social worker, but at the time, our social worker was at our house because you remember we needed to do an updated home study because we had been waiting 2 years and you have to have an updated home study.
To make sure the house is safe.
Right. And ironically, our social worker was at our house doing our home study when she gets a phone call from that birth family's social worker, and that they decided to parent Mac and that we would no longer be talking to them. And we had literally just told Kaysen like the day prior that he was going to be a brother to a little boy. There's all this kind of excitement. And then once again, that is just yanked out from under us. And it was hard because we had had another failed adoption prior to that one, but this one we were real involved with. Yeah. So we were devastated, and
which is a pattern
for us.
Yeah.
And at this time, because the other failed adoption that we had, both times, those birth families had not told their families about the pregnancy. And both times, when their families found out that they're pregnant, these are teen moms, right, their families convinced them to parent the child. So we were heartbroken.
And in both cases, it was going to be the first grandchild in the family. Mm-hmm. In both cases, the family said they would help to financially support the child. So
even though one of the birth mothers was like 14,
yeah,
a very hard situation. So we told our social worker at that point, please don't put us in the book, which is our profile page and everything, where they would give the birth families to look through. We were like, we really can't handle another heartbreak like that. So if a birth mother, father looks at our profile, they need to have their family completely on board with their adoption plans. Yeah. And that's what we did. Well, we waited and we waited and we waited, and Christmas night, we were just finished Christmas dinner, about to get dessert, and the phone rings. And it was our social worker, Carol, calling to let us know that a baby boy had been born on the 22nd, and that he's in Austin, and that his birth parents have chosen you guys. However, our social worker said, just wanted to let you know, I put your profile in for them. I just kind of had a feeling, so I put your profile in. But their families do not know that she was pregnant and that she's had a baby.
Right. Now, they were a little older.
A little bit
They were
older.
college students, so hiding a pregnancy was a lot easier.
Yeah, than when you're 14.
Yeah.
So that made us a little bit nervous. But the situation was a little bit different in regards that they were older, and that they were very solid in their decision to place the baby for adoption. But what really kind of stood out to both of us, we were both on our landline phone listening. Just wanted to let you know that they had named him already, and that they wanted you to keep his name.
To consider keeping his name.
Yes. And his name is Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I both just stop and look at each other, because what we said in our last episode, that the baby we lost, we had named Jackson, spelled him Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
She said, this is how they're spelling it, Jackson. We ended up taking the S out of it, but so it's still Jackson, but it's Jackson. So we ended up having a baby boy named Jackson. So those are two huge examples, and it's ironic that they're both based on adopting our two boys. Considering, my biggest prayer was always I wanted to be a mom, and both times God answered that prayer in very unique ways, but very...
It's a good way to put it. Unique
and personal.
and personal.
Our social worker did not know we had named our baby Jackson. So when she said that, that's his name, and they would really love it if you kept the name. And we both were silent and just looking at each other like, are you kidding me? I mean, of all the boy names, that's the name. So that was really special. And of course, then we get off the phone, and our parents, and they're like, what's going on? And we were like, we never ended up having dessert that night. We were scrambling, because the next morning we drove
down the next day to Austin.
And picked up Jackson. So he was in a little Santa hat, and his little bassinet. His name, it said "Good Saint Nick" on it.
And the nurses that had been watching him for 3.5 days were very attached to him.
Because his birth parents, because he was born on the 22nd, they went home to their families for Christmas. So they had signed over a third-party release to the hospital. And so they went home, and he was in the hospital over Christmas. And so these nurses took care of him until we got there on the 26th. And there's a couple of them that were extremely attached to him, and had tears in their eyes when we left with them and stuff. But it's a beautiful story, and we just see God's hand in that. But another God wink for us was, we mentioned before that Kason was not going to be able to go to public school, in the sense that it was going to be an absolute nightmare. And
at the time we couldn't really, it wasn't clear exactly why, like by diagnosis, but boy, it was sure clear by observance.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, when they said they were going to give them 30 minutes a week of social skills, and that was it, and that just was not going to cut it. So we were scrambling. We were like, what are we going to do?
Because we had always planned on going to public school.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So one day I take Kason into OT, which I felt like we lived up there, and I was sitting there with a friend whose son was also at OT. And I look over, and they had a table like this, and they had different brochures. And I look over, and there was new brochures sitting here, and it said St. Timothy Christian Academy on it, and it said for learning different students, K through 12. And I was like, that's interesting. So I go over and pick up the brochure and I'm looking at it and I'm like, Jeff, oh my gosh, we've got to look into this. This could be an answer for us. And it was.
It wasn't too far from the house.
Wasn't far from the house.
It was amazing.
It ended up being amazing. He was there for 13 years. It was a huge blessing to us and to Kaysen. That was one aspect of his life that we did not have to stress over, where I know many families struggle with the school situation and that the school doesn't get their child or whatever the situation is. It's hard. And we were very fortunate in that regard. That was one of the smoothest parts of our life. Yeah. Another huge God wink, and that came through St. Timothy, was we had talked about when we were seeing the child psychiatrist, and he suggested we need to institutionalize Kaysen, and we said, no, we're not going to do that. Then we needed to leave this doctor. What are we going to do? And this is about the same time, Kaysen's attacking me and you, and it's not a good situation. And it just happened to be that the founder's wife of St. Timothy Christian Academy, her sister-in-law is a psychiatric nurse who had started working for a younger new doctor. And she was accepting new patients, and that happens to be Dr. T.
Yep.
We couldn't have asked for a better situation, and again, it just kind of fell in our lap. I didn't have to go searching for doctors. We were in crisis mode at the time. We needed someone that was going to have our back, have Kaysen.
Well, it was going to take I guess, who knows what would have happened if she had said, no, I agree with that doctor. He needs to be institutionalized. But,
right.
That's why you seek a second opinion. So our hope was that we were going to find someone who would give Kaysen a chance.
Right.
And luckily she did.
She did. So that was a huge God wink in our life. It just, I can remember to the day when Mrs. Warren walked out to the car and she goes, you need to call, here's the number. Mm-hmm. And this is how I know her. She'd met her before. I think she can help you. And she has helped us in ways that I can't even describe. Another example was we talked in another episode of Kaysen's lithium toxicity and that whole experience and how we literally almost left the hospital because he wasn't getting treatment, wasn't getting care. No one was, helping us. And for whatever reason, which we now, we can look back and really feel it was God's presence was saying, don't leave, because we kind of know what would have happened if we had made the decision to go home with him. And
he would have died.
There's a good chance, because we didn't know what the problem was. And would we have given him another dose of lithium in his medicine, not understanding? But if we didn't give it to him, then he would be violent and psychotic. And it would have been an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
So we just really felt God's presence at the time we weren't thinking it. We were in such distress, but like I said, we can look back on this and be like, God's hand was all over that. Not letting you or me say, we're just going, we've been here for how many, 12, 13 hours. Let's just go home and we'll figure this out tomorrow. Well,
we were sure hoping we'd go home.
Right.
Yeah.
So glad we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
The other big one you can talk about, and we've already talked about it in episode 3 of.
Yeah. And that what we're referring to is that incident where he had attacked you and Jackson in the car, and I had to come home and restrain him for hours. And, it was definitely a valley. When he was in his room, he's 5.5 years old, and he picks up his children's Bible, and he asked me where in the Bible it said that he could fix his brain. Mm-hmm. And boy, I remember thinking that was I felt like time stopped, because it was so unexpected. just the fact that he had the wherewithal to understand that,
Mm-hmm.
that the answers were in, that he felt the answers were in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And this is despite, at that point he hadn't really been in much of a church experience because we couldn't go to church, but the fact that he picked up on it and the fact that he was able to ask about it was another one of those moments. It just defines the yin and the yang of parenting Kason, because minutes earlier he had been a raving lunatic who just, thank God there wasn't something sharp around, and now he has suddenly crossed this Rubicon into a moment of sanity, and he's able to articulate that. And I remember I was trying hard not to break down in tears because I was tired. I was exhausted. I'd been holding him down for 4 hours, and it wasn't like he ever rested in that 4 hours. He was physically trying to get out of my grip for 4 hours. And so because he had calmed down, I was finally able to just kind of lean back against the door, and I hadn't left his room yet. Still making sure that it was going to be safe. And, he said that, and I just remember, I just almost didn't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't.
Yeah, when you finally came out of the room and stuff and told me, I mean, you and I both just kind of had this moment of like looking at each other and saying, like, that was almost like a validation to us that we're like, see, God is here. I mean, in that moment, I'm doing everything I can to protect Jackson. I had just been beaten up by my 5.5-year-old. And yet, like you just said, I had seen how horrible he was. And then you got to see this little glimpse of him where it's like God was reaching down and touching him and saying, it's okay.
And I think that that's another perfect illustration of where faith, if you operate under the delusion that faith is something that's going to solve your problems like that, it's not probably going to happen that way. The fact that whole experience of hours before that, continued hours of high stress, high danger, high concern, that this moment happened there. I at the time, I guess I could have chosen to look at it and say, why didn't this happen 5 hours ago?
Mm-hmm.
But, and in fact, he got hot again shortly after that. It didn't last for a long period of time, but it was just this break in the storm.
Mm-hmm. And so we kind of said, and we still to this day say, well, maybe it wasn't just for Kason. Maybe it was for us too.
I think it was more for us.
I mean, that was a big God wink for us.
It was.
It kind of led us on that helped us remember these past experiences that I just spoke about, that it had been so hard with Kason up to that point.
Well, it continues.
And it continues, but up to that point, I mean, that it had just been really hard. And we really hadn't seen many, I would say, God winks in that time. I mean, it was every day was a battle, every day was a fight. And when that happened, and then shortly after that is when we found Dr. T, and it was kind of like God at that moment, it's almost like God was trying to say, hold on, Jeff. Hold on, Kim. Like, I have Kason. I have y'all. And it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because there's so many times where you and I say to ourselves, I don't think we can do this another day.
Well, we said it a lot,
And like God, seriously, every time he does, he's shown up.
He has always seemed to show up. I'm not going to say at the right time, because It's certainly not the time that I want it to happen. I want it to happen sooner, but showed up, and I think that's it's the realization that no matter how bad things get, there is a pathway that we can't see. And I think that was, all these moments, those are all moments that happened between the time he was born and the time he was like, 6 or whatever. The 23-year journey has definitely had phases. The first 6 years were all about unknown. The next 7 years were all about diagnoses. Those first 13 years were up until we finally got a true diagnosis that really told us what was going on. It was like we were flying blind. We were on a path that we just had no visibility. I mean, it's like piloting a plane in zero visibility, and you're trusting the instruments that you're not going to hit a mountain because it says there's not a mountain in your way. And we would get just enough to let us know there wasn't a mountain in the way. And I think it's so critical, at least from our experience, it's so critical to understand that faith is so easy when you don't have issues. When everything is solid, when your family is healthy and you're financially stable and everything's going great and your kids are making the soccer team and all the things are going great, it is really easy to talk about how strong your faith is. You don't know how strong your faith is until it truly gets tested. And
we have had tests after tests after tests.
And honestly, it just feels to me like the reason we have strong faith is not because we feel there have been all these rewards that we have gotten for having faith. It's because we've gotten just enough to know that we're going to be okay. That having faith can be really hard, especially when things aren't going well. It's very easy to say, why me? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why am I the only one this is happening to? Why do I feel so alone? Where are you? It's so easy to say those things. And quite honestly, there are definitely times when you believe it.
Well, and we have mentioned before, I mean, I still struggle with that today in the sense of saying, in fact, I just talked about it on Saturday. I think about how I'm like, my gosh, look at, am I cursed?
Yeah.
Am I, yeah. What did I do wrong that I had to go through what I've had to go through to have the experience of being a mom? When I look around, and it's so easy for everybody else.
Yeah.
Not everybody, a lot of people.
I think that's very common, that when you're in a situation, not even necessarily a special needs family situation, but when you're in a situation where either because of where you live or what goes on, it's really easy to feel like you're singled out. Living in North Dallas, it's really easy to feel that way, but faith is the true definition of faith is ultimately believing in something that you can't concretely hold or prove. You have faith that something is there. You have faith that something will work out. And our faith, there's a saying, iron sharpens iron. I think if the strength of your faith is measured by the trials that you go through that strengthen your faith. And believe me, I know I've talked to people who lost faith because of the things that they went through. It just hasn't worked out that way for us.
Mm-mm.
Because we have seen the signs just enough to let us know that we're on the right road and we're going to be okay, even if we can't define what that is.
Right. And I think we both have had so many people say to us that don't know our story, when they first meet me or something, and then they find out about our story, they'll be like, I would have never known. You always have a smile on your face. You always are asking about me, or you emit happiness. If I would be able to do that, and I always say to them that it has to be the peace that God gives us, because this journey is not over for us. I mean, it continues.
Well, I mean, the reality is my faith will be tested a week from now, tomorrow. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, something will happen that will be, and you would, I guess, to some degree, you would almost think that in the situation we've been in for as long as we've been in it, that we should expect things. And we do. I mean, we do expect curveballs, but it's amazing how many varieties, that I mean, we're dealing with something right now with, we're 2 weeks away from a stress test,
yeah.
right? A stress test for Kaysen that.
Yeah, we talked about last week.
The results of that, in a worst case scenario, the results of that are a pretty big unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to, it has the potential to severely disrupt this relative stability we have found, and our lives could change dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess I wish that I could say that faith has made me feel less stressed, has made me feel
less worried.
I wish that I could say, yeah, I have let go and let God. I am not good at that.
Mm-hmm.
I will freely admit it. And I don't think that makes me terribly unique, but it
and I think, like, I'm going to say it again, we can look back and specifically say that God has placed people, friends, doctors, schools, whatever in our path, that if we weren't aware of it, we could be like, oh, that was my doing or whatever. But it's not. I mean, there's always a reason why we end up meeting somebody that has a child like Kaysen, or a doctor through another doctor that ends up really helping Kaysen or helping us find the solution to whatever this medical problem is at the time. And all those little God winks for us have given us hope that no matter what the next crisis, the next unknown, the next worry, the next fear, because they're coming, we just know that God has it, and it will be okay. Kaysen will be okay, and we'll be okay. Not that it's not going to be hard or frustrating, or he might go into psychosis again because we have to change medicine, whatever it might be.
Well, and it's been a long time since it was in psychosis. Mm-hmm. When you say it like that, it makes it sound like it happened for the reason. It's been years.
It's been years
since he's been in psychosis. This is a truly scary proposition,
mm-hmm.
Because he's a lot bigger and stuff than he was last time he was in psychosis. Mm-hmm. I just love the story that you told me you go to a Bible study on Tuesday mornings, and we just had at our church, we just had the Special Needs Sunday, where the entire special needs ministry, they go up on stage and they sing a song and they sign it in sign language. And they only do it once a year. And it's amazing how much it's grown. This whole stage is filled with and this is not just this is not just adults. This is kids and adults. And they're all up there, and they're oblivious to the differences in age and needs to each other, and they're so committed to doing a good job with the way they're signing words to the song. And us, the special needs parents, we're filming it, and I mean, this is our this is our Christmas pageant kind of thing. And someone in your Bible study group said that she watched that, and after hearing this podcast, she said that she looked at that totally different than she'd ever looked at it before. That she had a newfound appreciation for the families, but also for the kids,
and that she's truly sees, and that our church sees that these kids and adults with special needs are still viewed perfectly in God's eyes.
And that was what struck me, is that she said that, she said that she essentially said that these kids are made in God's image, and that's such a beautiful thing to hear,
because we don't hear it very often.
Because we don't hear it very often, and we don't barely ever hear it.
You're criticized as being bad parents. Yeah. You're ostracized because your kid can't do or be a part,
or because they need something.
Right? Yeah.
So
yeah, you're it's very different, but it's I mean, a big God wink would be finding our church.
Yeah.
We were introduced to that church by somebody that had heard that they have a good special needs ministry, and first time you and I went by ourselves just to kind of check it out, and going in and talking with the director at the time. She's not there anymore. It's a different director, but her and then an older gentleman who had helped found the special needs program, just hearing them say to us, it doesn't matter what Kaysen is like. It doesn't matter if he's having a bad day. It doesn't matter. We'll love him, and you guys can go to church. And
yeah, so I mean, the bottom line is that I guess I can certainly understand if people in our position are
without faith,
if they're questioning why this is all happening and where is God. I can understand, I get where they're coming from. I mean, all I can say is that we have spent the last 2 weeks talking about that the way we have managed to stay married had a lot to do with us being on the same page, us being there for each other when those valleys happen, us being there to lift the other one up when the other one's having a hard time. But the reality is, all of that has been driven by our faith. And man, when you live in a situation where about the only other person you can totally count on is your spouse, I need that other thing to believe that that's there too, and we've been talking about the whole reason we did these episodes on marriage is because we know how high the divorce rate is for families like us. We know it's 9 in 10, and there are people out there that are watching this right now, probably mostly moms, some dads, I hope, that they're in this alone. And they don't have to be. It's just, it's such a heavy burden. And it just makes it a little lighter. That's the way we feel about it.
Right.
And, again, it's not that it makes it easier. It's not that it solves all the problems. Honestly, it doesn't do either of those things.
Nope.
It just makes it a little easier to bear the burden.
Right.
And sometimes it makes it a lot easier. And that's why it's the foundation of how we've managed to stay married.
Right. And Kaysen hasn't had an incident with the Bible like he did then.
Right.
But his connection to God is something I've never seen and you've never.
I mean, I can't explain it.
The fact that he doesn't understand so much, but he knows the basic, like, God loves me, and he cares for other people. I mean, he'll be the first person, like, when he knows somebody's hurting, or something as simple as when he was in school, somebody was sick, went home sick, and I would pick him up, and the first thing he would say is, "Mommy, we need to pray for so-and-so." And he didn't know how to pray. Like, he doesn't know the word. He doesn't know what to say, but he knows in his heart that that's good and that God can help them, heal them.
He's not really at a point yet where he can pray.
Mm-mm.
I think he'll get there. I don't know that I thought that would ever happen, but he, when he says we need to pray for them, that's his way of saying, let's pray by you praying, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to hang on every word you say and believe it and all of that. But I think ultimately the biggest testament to faith is, and this is true for anybody, you don't notice how much things change until you really look back on it. Because I know that when Kaysen was 13, and he had been diagnosed with
a million things.
The word schizophrenia had been finally attached to him. I mean, I thought at 13, my God, we were told 8 years ago we should have institutionalized him. Who knows where this goes? And 10 years later, he is amazing.
Very happy.
Extremely happy. Intense, difficult, but so much more than I ever thought he would be capable of being. And I think that's a testament to the faith, because, like I stress, it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make it less stressful, but there is a reward in seeing him.
It is. And I think we can kind of end it on this story of Kaysen loves Christian music. And
oh yeah, the bells.
One day I picked him up from school. He was probably like a junior or so it wasn't all that long ago. And I picked him up from school, and he gets in the car and says, "Mommy, I heard my new favorite song today. Can we play it?" And I was like, "Sure, what is it?" And he said, "Living Hope" by Phil Wickham. And I was like, "Sure, I have it. It's already on my playlist." So pulled it up and pressed play, and we start driving, and the song hadn't been on for more than 10 seconds. And he says, "Do you hear the bells? Do you hear all the ringing?" And I'm like, "No." Like, am I supposed to have heard that? So no. I keep listening, and he's listening, and he goes, "There it is again. Do you hear that?" And I said, "No. No." And he's like, "Why can't I hear everything? I hear ringing. I hear some I hear some music, but I hear bells and ringing. And he goes, I love this song. And I said, Bud, I think it's your brain playing tricks on you. And this was what we would experience as like called breakthrough hallucinations for him, that weird stuff like this would happen. And I said, Bud, there's nothing we can do about it. Let's try to ignore it and stuff. Well, when he latches onto a song or a show or something, he is obsessed with it. So anytime he was in the car, we had to listen to this song, Living Hope.
And
Living
obsessed does not mean days or weeks. It could mean years.
Right.
Yeah.
So every time we're in the car, do you hear the ringing? I'm like, Kason, no. Remember, I told you I don't hear the ringing. I hear Phil Wickham singing the song. He goes, well, I hear the music, but I hear bells ringing. And I mean, on and on and on. This went on every time. One day, it probably was maybe a year and a half later, we get in the car and I want to hear Living Hope. I'm like, okay, so I turn it on and we get through maybe half the song and I'm driving and he looks at me and he goes, Mommy, I don't hear bells and I don't hear ringing. And I said, you don't? And he's like, no. And he sat there and he just listening some more and he goes, oh, how I love this song. And he gets this huge smile on his face. And it's like he, for the first time, actually heard the words of the song.
Yeah.
But it was like he, for whatever reason, had been being pulled back to this Living Hope song. And he still, to this day, it's one of his absolute favorite songs.
Yeah.
And the beginning of the song says this: how great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished. The end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. And for him to not have been able to hear that, but he just kept hearing bells. And then for one day, literally, it's like the hallucination stopped, but he heard that and he was just filled with joy. Kason is a constant testament to both of us. And God's with us and always will be. And that no matter how hard things are, he'll see us through. And that is why we've been married for almost 31 years.
Yeah. That's it.
That's it.
That's a good way to end it.
Yes.
Well, so we'll be back next week. We'll come back to marriage, I'm sure, at some point. But next week we're going to start talking about the challenges of raising kids who don't have special needs in a family where you have a special needs child. Hope you'll come back and join us on Specialness. Until then, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Kim.
And we'll see you there.